Hello everyone, this is Herka. Today we will learn how to draw some dynamic dog poses. The initial sketch is the most important phase of the entire process. Here the decisive choices for the success of the drawing are made. My goal is not to faithfully reproduce the subject of the photo. What matters most is capturing the energy and movement of the subject while achieving a cohesive sense of harmony in the composition. Every image has its strengths. In this case, the frontal view is very engaging. The dog is running towards us, and conveying this sense of dynamism is important. For example, the front paw is one of the key elements. Once we manage to capture the perspective of the paw, well, we have already made a big step forward towards the success of the drawing. Now, keep the sketch lines in the background with low opacity. They will serve as a reference for the outline, which will be sharper and more defined. Try to adjust the pen pressure based on the area of the subject. Use more pressure on the outer lines and lighten the pressure when drawing the internal lines. This will make the entire drawing more dynamic and interesting. Try to be creative and experiment with new combinations of lines and strokes. Over time, you'll get better at understanding which shapes work together better. And the whole process will become much more enjoyable. At this stage, we will give the subject a sense of three-dimensionality with chiaroscuro. Using the lasso tool, we select the areas of the dog that do not receive direct light. Then, observing the reference photo, we decrease the brightness until the tone satisfies us. Over time, you will be able to understand which areas to darken without constantly checking the reference photo. Continue to add layers of shading and chiaroscuro until all the main volumes of the subject are clearly defined. This means paying attention to the overall shape and structure of the subject, and using the contrast between light and dark to create a sense of depth and dimensionality. As you add more shading, you should start to see the subject take on a more three-dimensional appearance, with the main forms and volumes becoming increasingly evident. Keep working until you feel that the subject has a clear and convincing sense of volume and structure. Now that I have defined the main volumes of the subject, I could spend another couple of hours smoothing out the details to achieve a clean and well-defined appearance in every aspect. However, this is not my objective at the moment. For now, I'm satisfied with the result I have achieved, as it aligns with the goals I had in mind. Just as with the previous subject, our goal here is to capture the energy of the dog's pose with a few well-placed lines. This is where we establish the anatomical structure and dynamic movement of the pose. I often try to exaggerate certain aspects of the subject to create a more personal interpretation of the scene. By doing so, I aim to infuse the drawing with a sense of life and character that goes beyond a strictly realistic representation. This approach allows me to distill the essence of the subject and convey its unique personality, rather than simply reproducing its physical appearance. The key is to strike a balance between accuracy and creative expression, using lines and shapes to convey the energy and movement of the pose. Occasionally, I'm challenged to draw elements from new and unfamiliar perspectives, like these paws. In such cases, my approach is not to strive for anatomical accuracy, but to use simplified forms that help me capture the essence of the element. Doing so makes the process more streamlined and spontaneous, allowing me to focus on the overall gesture and movement rather than getting bogged down in details. As before, I start by darkening the shadowed areas as shown in the reference image. At the same time, I rely on my experience and intuition to identify any additional shadowed regions that may not be entirely clear from the reference. It's not a problem if I accidentally shade some areas incorrectly. The key is that the overall composition works cohesively and convincingly for the viewer's eye. For instance, you'll often notice that the brightest areas are juxtaposed with the darkest zones, creating a dynamic contrast that enhances the overall composition. I love this pose. It's truly dynamic. It will be fun and challenging to capture the right inclination of the lines to achieve the same dynamism. Before moving on to the outline, double-check that the subject's parts are well-balanced and proportionate. As I mentioned before, I aim to simplify the lines to maintain the fluidity of the process. Occasionally try to invent new visual solutions to represent different elements. This will add more personality to the illustration. Of course, the best solutions don't always come on the first try, but don't be afraid to experiment and iterate. In some cases, the smudge tool is very useful for blending lights and shadows to achieve a softer and more organic gradient. Great! I hope you found this video helpful. Remember, learning to draw isn't about constantly redoing the same things, but about continuously challenging yourself with new subjects and new challenges. That's where the real fun lies.